The first Noel, the angel did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Then did appear a wondrous star, shining in the east, beyond them far unto the earth. It gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. And by the light of that same star, 3 wise men came from country far to seek a king was their intent, and to follow the star wherever it went. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
Mark chapter number 9 tonight. Once you find your place, stand. I'm just going to read 2 verses. And no, that's not true. I'm going to read 3 verses. No, I'm going to read 2 verses. I'm going to read 2 verses, and we will pray, and you can be seated, and I'll try to share my heart with you tonight. Down in verse number 33, now we are going. I realize where we left off. We're going to go back and catch the other 3 verses, but we're going to read in verse number 33, and this is where we're going to get our thought tonight. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, "What was it that you disputed among yourselves by the way?" But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. Who should be the greatest? And so pray with me tonight, and I'm going to preach on this thought, the essence tonight of greatness. And so, Brother Andrew, lead us as we go to the Lord in prayer. Amen. Thank you for standing. You can be seated. Now, I'm going to ask you perhaps a loaded question tonight, or I guess it's not a loaded question. It would be a question that is, depending on who you are, depending on where you may think the answer may be. Who would be in athletics, if I would ask you who is the GOAT, greatest of all time, okay? If I ask that question, particularly pertaining to basketball, there's going to be 2 names more than likely that's going to come up. You're going to hear the name Jordan, and you're going to hear the name LeBron. Now, let me just answer that. That is really not that difficult. That is an easy question to answer. Everybody knows that Jordan is the GOAT. I got some spiritual people. Y'all won't say amen to anything else, but, man, you talk about Michael Jordan, and so that's good. We're on the same page. And LeBron wouldn't even fit on the same court. But anyhow, that's a whole different message and a whole different thought. But so you get the idea, right? The greatest of all time. And I think years ago, Will, you've done come out of that LeBron shadow, haven't you? He's not. He's still in the LeBron shadow. Help him up there, Brother John. Help him with that. Now, the greatest of all time. All right, what about this? What about it? Many would say that Brady, Tom Brady in football would be the greatest of all time. That hurts my feelings to say that. He's at least got to be in the running, as much as I don't like him. And, I think he's a crybaby. But anyway, you'd say that. Muhammad Ali was the self-proclaimed greatest of all time. All right, he told everybody that, listen, there's nothing up for debate. You're looking at him. I'm him. And so there's a lot of debate on the greatest of all time. All right, now Now let's move out of sports. What if I were to ask you to tell me to choose between Beethoven or Mozart? Who would be the greatest of all time? Or maybe between Michelangelo or Da Vinci? Who's the greatest U.S. president? All of those things, everybody has their opinion, right? Everybody has their ideas of who they might be. But here's the reality: men have always aspired for greatness, right? We have always sought greatness. Either that, or we have always held men in esteem to a particular height of greatness. Okay, that is something that we have done that we have put people in places and we describe them as they're great. They are the greatest of all times, or they're in a position, if you would, of honor or a position of prestige because of who they are or what they have accomplished. Now, in our text, these disciples were not much different than we are. Now, here's the problem. Our society is all about building your own empire. We really are. Our society is about building your own empire. We have a system and I think it's a dangerous system, but we have a system of success or failure, and even among the church. Even among the church. You know, we point fingers at the world a lot of times, but I think we would do well to do some self-examination as to what goes on but beyond, or what goes on within our four walls, or particularly within our community of the church. You know, we have people that we have propped up as heroes. We have people that we have put up on a pedestal. Now, I do believe that there have been some great men. I believe there's been some faithful ladies. You know, when you look at people like the Elizabeth Elliots, if you know anything about studying Elizabeth Elliot, she is a hero. I believe that she's a true hero of the faith because of what she did. Her husband died as a very young man, but reached people for Christ. I believe that it's okay to honor people. And so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But even within the church, what we do is this, I'm afraid, because we have the mentality of this thing of greatness, it leaves us to, there's so many people that struggle with this thing of failure if they do not attain unto the level as to what they have described greatness to be. In other words, our church is not running the same amount of people as the church across town. Therefore, their success, we're a failure. I don't preach as many meetings as somebody across town. Therefore, he is the greatest and I'm a failure. Well, I haven't won as many people to Christ as what all these people in the prayer list, so therefore, they are greater than I, and I'm a failure. You see, if we're not careful, we have associated greatness and success and that of failure, and we have literally created a failure culture. Now, I'm not preaching on failure tonight, but I'm just telling you this mentality that we have about this matter of greatness and what is great, and rather who is great, can be dangerous. Positions, titles, entitlements, all of these things that we give to people that we say are great, right? All of those things in and of itself may not be bad, but there may be some problems behind those things when they are building their own empire versus building the kingdom of God. All right, and so now let's look at a few things. Now, there's nothing wrong with seeking to be your best. As a matter of fact, we should seek to be our best. I should seek to be the best man that I can be. I should seek to be the best preacher that I can be. I should seek to be and endeavor to be the best Christian that I possibly can be, to walk in the Spirit, to be led of the Spirit. I should seek that, endeavor to do that, rather than being lazy and sitting on the seat of do nothing and saying, well, it'll all sort itself out in the end. So I'm not leaving here tonight. I don't want you to leave here tonight saying, well, we should just be apathetic because it all don't matter anyway. That is not the crux of the message. However, I'm afraid that today we have misinterpreted greatness into calling it success and popularity. And there's a difference. Just because a man is popular does not mean he's great. Just because a man has ability doesn't mean he's great. Right? Listen, I pick and I cut up. I'm just telling you, I'm not a LeBron James fan. There's nothing about LeBron James that I really care for. Nothing. I don't like his attitude. I don't like his politics. I don't even like how he plays basketball. But at the end of the day, he does have ability. Now, he walks and he flops, but he has ability. Now let me say this. But just because a man, there are men in this world who are great speakers. There are men in this world who can sing and they have talent, they have ability. But in the eyes of God, that ability does not mean they're great, nor that they have attained greatness. Okay? There are men with position, and there's men with power, and there's men with influence. But that doesn't mean they're great in the eyes of God. Now, when you come to this portion of Scripture, you find disciples that are trying to figure out who's the greatest. When we get to the kingdom, who's the greatest? Now, it almost sounds childish when you read it, and it really is. It shows a level of immaturity. When we get to the kingdom, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? It's probably going to be me. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. All right, but when you find Jesus, how Jesus deals with this, you find Jesus as a very patient, yet a very plain teacher. Jesus, the rabbi, Jesus, the master, Jesus, the teacher, and he knows what's going on. Jesus is not oblivious to our thinking and to our speech and to our actions. You ever wonder why Jesus didn't just nip this in the bud while they was walking down the road? If that had been y'all in a car with your kids, you'd have said, be quiet, I don't want to hear another word out of you till we get there. None of y'all are worth anything. I pay the bills. You depending on me. I'm the greatest. You be quiet until we get there. How many would have done your children that way? I probably never would have. We'd have probably stopped and prayed. And, all right, but Jesus didn't do that. Jesus let them talk. He let them go through all that. And when they get there and they get in private, Jesus said, I want y'all to come here for a minute. And he sits down and he brings them in and he begins to teach them about what it really means to be great and how we achieve greatness. And so I want us to look at this scenario of Jesus teaching his disciples about greatness. Now, the lesson that he has to them, Jesus is going to reveal to them what makes a man great and what makes a man not so great. Now, I want you to think about, before we jump into this, I want you to think about who Jesus is speaking to. Jesus is speaking to men who, without a doubt, one day they would be great. In fact, when you get over into the book of Revelation, when John has that vision, and we begin to talk about the foundations of the city, oh yes, they're going to be great men. But here, they're still growing men. Here, they're still learning men. And I'm glad that Jesus took them from where they were here, and he saw where they were going to be over there, and Jesus brought them to greatness. Listen, if you're here tonight, I want you to understand, you say, preacher, there's not much good about me. There's not nothing special about me. I don't have talent. I don't have ability. You know, I can't play like Miss Stephanie. I can't sing like Jared. I can't run like Brother Chon. I just don't have it. Listen, I'm telling you right now, there is something that God has for you, and God, if we'll listen to him, can cause us to do great things for his cause. And he can take you from where we are, can take us from where we are right now, and he sees down the road from where he wants us to be, and he knows how to get us there. And so I think we can take this lesson that Jesus, in very gracious terms and in very kind terms, begin to teach these men. And again, I'll say, I like this. He doesn't do this to build a failure culture. Now, obviously, if we live in disobedience, that's on us, right? Because the standard is not, okay, I'm great as compared to what John is doing. My greatness, well, I'm doing more than him, so obviously I'm greater than him. That's not the standard of my greatness. That's not the standard of your greatness. And so we'll see that here in just a moment. So let's look at about three things as we talk about this essence of greatness, and then we'll have prayer on the altar and we'll go to the house. In verse number 33 and 34, our text verses that I read, the first thing that we need to do is learn from their dispute. We need to learn from their dispute. Now, dispute is a fancy way of talking about they sort of had a non-heated argument. And it might have got a little heated. I don't know that, but it might have got a little bit heated. All right, but there's a lesson to be learned from that. Now, you can learn some things from two people's arguments. That's why we watch political debates. Now, the problem with that is most of the time both sides are lying. They're just trying to get voters. That's really all they care about. You've heard me say that before. It's a whole lot like WWE. When they're all said and done, they're going out to eat and laughing at the rest of the way of the country. I'm convinced that a lot of that goes on. But what I'm saying is this: you can learn by listening to people. Now, when you read this text and you see that Jesus says, "What was it that you disputed among yourselves by the way?" Now, he's talking about God's people arguing with God's people. There's a profound thought. The disciples wasn't so much different than we are after all. Now, what that would look like in modern day is, I believe this as well. I'd be a better pastor than he is. I think I should have that position. I'm telling you, Brother Andrew's pretty good, but I think I'd be a better deacon than Brother Andrew. I mean, I do. I think I'd be a better deacon, and Brother Terry, he's getting on up in years. I don't know. I might be a better trustee than he is. I don't know. Now, you can kind of hear the dynamic of what our church. I'm going to get voted out before it's all said and done. Andrew will make a motion, Brother Terry will second it. But you can kind of hear the dynamic of that, right? But they're arguing, and Jesus said, "What were you disputing about on the way here?" All right, now we don't know a whole lot about the conversation. We just know that Jesus calls it a dispute, and we know what it was about because the Bible tells us so. The word dispute means to reason or to deliberate. And so it would seem in that deliberation or in that reasoning with each other, what they were doing is they were literally giving the reasons as to why they would be the greatest. That takes a lot of audacity to do that. I mean, it really does. It takes something for a man to look at 11 other people and say, "Okay, you guys are okay, but you just don't measure up to me. You just don't measure up to me." And so I got to thinking about what would cause that, or what kind of evidence would they be offering? Because that's what they're doing. They're offering evidence. This is why. Now, I'll get ahead of myself because I'm going to give you a couple things about this. But what they were doing is they were basing that upon their own deeds, their own works, and their own abilities. Their own privileges and their own experiences. All of their greatness was based inwardly, not outwardly. I am because of what I can do. I am because of how Jesus talked to me. I am because of this or because of this. I will be the greatest. All right, so why should they be considered greatest when they get into the kingdom? Now, again, they're anticipating the kingdom. They're looking for it. They're expecting it. All right, the first thing I see is this: pride. I mean, how could you not say pride? How could you not say they had a pride problem? I should be the greatest. I wrote this down. I wonder, personally, and I was reading this afternoon in my office right before church time. I was reading a little bit, and I was reading another author believes that it was probably sparked. Does anybody remember where they just came from? They came off the Mount of Transfiguration. All of them didn't get to go. Only 3 of them got to go. And they weren't allowed to talk about it. But have you ever been around people who know something and they can't tell you what they know, but they can tell you that they do know, even though they can't tell you? You know, like in the 3rd grade, I know something you don't know. Now, I'm not saying they did that, but I'm telling you this. The rest of those men were aware that those 3 went somewhere where they didn't. They were aware of that. And here's the reality of that. We really don't know why Jesus allowed them to go. Were they great men? They were going to be. But so were 8 of the 9 others. Right? And so at the end of the day, Jesus chose to use who he chose to use in the capacity that he chose to use them, not because of how great they were, but because of the task that he wanted them to accomplish. Yet when they offer their evidence, so I wonder if they were kind of vying for the throne, so to speak. Well, and maybe it was 3-on-9. Well, probably the three of us, we don't want to hurt your feelings, and you guys will get there one day, but we're probably going to be the greatest, and so you just need to prepare yourself now that that way you don't be disappointed. We don't want you to be disappointed. Let me tell you what that is. That's pride. That's pride. When we prop ourselves up as being the greatest, as being something within ourselves, that comes and it stems from pride. Sometimes the pride of God's favor and blessing can go to our head in the matter of making us feel or think that we are actually that important. Think about it. Think about it. Listen, I don't want to meddle, and I feel like I would be speaking out of turn to fully go involved in this, but I know that it doesn't just happen to people in the pew; it also happens to people behind the pulpit. We begin to feel entitled. We begin to feel like we have to live a certain way, and begin to feel like that we're above certain things. And again, and I can reverse that. It's not just in the pulpit; it's in the pew too. It's in the pew too. I deserve this. And so what happens is sometimes we mistake God's blessing. These three got to go up on the mountain. Why was that? God's favor, God's blessing, God's choice. God using us in a way that had to be all God, because we don't have that ability. Yet God uses us, but if we're not careful, pride will creep in. That can cause a problem. All right, so I see pride. Now, the second thing I see that can come out of this dispute is division. Division. We start dividing people. I'm up here, you're down here. I'm important, you're unimportant. I matter, you don't really matter that much. Division. Ironically enough, I was involved in a group text today dealing with a bunch of preachers dealing about division, and it didn't stem from this, but there's a thought that came out of that conversation. And here it is, that the idea wasn't that they were divided. We were actually talking about unity in the church. We're actually talking about being unified. And the whole conversation went something along these lines of, is a lot of people, or some people's idea of unity is just simply, I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone, and we can all get along. The problem with that is there's no unity in that. That's not biblical unity. That's just essentially, we're not going to bother each other. All right, there can still be division without being any squabbling. Right? Unity is coming together and saying this, hey, listen, we are unified. We're a unified body, not in our hobbies or our likes or dislikes. We are unified because we're servants of Jesus Christ. We're unified in purpose. We're unified in function. We're unified in the mission that we're trying to accomplish. And therefore, because of that unity in mission and that unity in body, we can fellowship one with another as we fellowship with Him, which is precisely what 1 John chapter number 1 talks about. But you start dividing people out, and I matter more than you matter, and I'm more important than you are, and don't bother me with that. Don't bother me with this. And I'm telling you, it can happen to the best of us. It can happen to the best of us. And so I can imagine here that it could have caused some division. And as a matter of fact, it's going to come up later. This is going to come up later again. We'll see it just a few chapters over. And let me tell you what it's doing. It's still causing division. All right, what about this? What about a lack of focus? I can prove this one. You say, preacher, what are you talking about? Because they were so busy squabbling and discussing, trying to figure out, well, how great I am and ranking each other based on position, they missed one of the most important messages and lessons that they needed to hear. And this would be the second time that they heard it. Look back at verse number 30. And they departed thence. This is after they couldn't cast out the demon. And they departed thence and passed through Galilee, and he would not that any man should know it. For he taught his disciples and said unto them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And after that he is killed, he shall rise the third day. How many of you would say that's pertinent information? That is the message. Preaching this message will determine whether or not these men are great or whether or not these men are failures. This message will be the determining factor of greatness. And yet they were so caught up in their own greatness that they missed what was really going to make them great. Look what it says. The Bible said, but they understood not that saying. It really tells us their level of where they were really at spiritually. You see, it lacked their focus. Their focus should have been on the coming of the kingdom of Christ, not where they were going to be in that kingdom. Their focus should have been on the work that God had called them to do. You know, I'll make you fishers of men. I'm going to send you forth. You've already been going out preaching. By the way, you've had some success with it, but then we just learned when you come back from this town, you've also had some failures in it. And so therefore, they should have focused on the work and the task that God had called them to do. Now, they ignored it. They didn't address it. Now, let me give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. It could have been the reason that they were afraid is because they remember Peter's rebuke in chapter number 8. You remember chapter number 8? Jesus told him the first time, I'm going to go, I'm going to be crucified, I'm going to be betrayed of men, crucified. Peter rebuked him. Not so, Lord. To which Jesus said, get thee behind me, Satan. Now, it could have been that when they heard Jesus say that, they were like, I ain't saying nothing. You say something. I ain't saying nothing. Peter will say something. We'll just stand back and watch. And Peter said, I ain't saying nothing. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs, but I will give them the benefit of the doubt on that. That it could be that this fear was genuinely, okay, and I'm pretty confident that between Peter, James, and John, Peter had learned, I done said the wrong thing up on the mountain. I'm for sure not saying anything. Right? Sometimes you're better off not to say nothing. Peter said, I got it for now. Now, so I don't know, but I know this. This was the time they should have been asking questions. This was the time they should have said, Lord, we don't understand. God, we thought you come to set up your kingdom. God, we don't understand. Lord, teach us. God, show us. We want to know. We want to learn. But yet, they were so focused on, we were called. We're one of the kingdom. We're followers. We're disciples of Christ. So much so that you're going to find in the next section of this that they are going to rebuke someone for doing the work that they should have been doing because he wasn't actually in their little clique and in their little group. You say, what are you talking about, preacher? I'm telling you, there's lessons to be learned from their dispute. All right, let me give you the second thing. Are you ready? We need to learn to listen to his directions. To listen to his directions. I wrote this down, and I don't know if this will help you, and I thought about trying to how to get it worded, but I hope it will. True greatness, and I'll read it so I don't mess it up. True greatness is not to be determined by the standing in our own eyes, but by the standard that's set forth in his eyes. I'm going to read it again. True greatness is not to be determined by the standing in our own eyes, but by the standard set in his eyes. Let's go back to the basketball analogy. There are some people, they have no opinion on who the greatest basketball player is ever because they don't care. They don't care. It is a moot point to them. They are a bunch of overpaid, underworked, privileged individuals who know how to bounce a ball up and it comes right back in their hand. I'm not trying to be crude. And so this whole world that's championing and making them heroes. Let me tell you this. Listen to me what I'm going to say. I could care less who wins a Grammy. I could care less. I could care less what they do in their parties, other than the wickedness that's come forth. But I'm probably not going to stay up at night and watch it. I think they're all a bunch of Fruit Loops. I think they're nuts. I think that this world has lost their mind. I'm not trying to be ugly. I don't mean, listen, I don't mean it, Fruit Loops the way you think. That's not what I mean. They're crazy. They have crazy beliefs. They have crazy things. We don't see eye to eye. That's so for everybody to say, oh, they're awesome. They're great. They're wonderful. They're amazing. I love them. You know, listen, they're great in your eyes, but not in mine. Here's the problem. If the only greatness we aspire to be is that which we see to be great, and we miss that God has a standard for greatness, we may never achieve what we think we have. All right, so let's look at what Jesus directs them in, because he gives them directions. The eyes of one. What is the standard for greatness that Jesus set? It's not being popular, because they're not going to be popular. You understand, these guys are popular now, but they weren't popular then. Now, they had a following, don't get me wrong. They did gain in popularity, but as far as the world, it wasn't that people were just everywhere following them. Would you sign my scroll? It wasn't that way. All right, so Jesus, it wasn't about their popularity. It wasn't because they were so powerful, because we see in the previous verses, we've already seen that they failed. This coming forth by prayer and fasting. So apparently you ain't been praying, you ain't been fasting. Right? Don't sound very great to me. But what is God's standard for greatness? Well, he gives it to us. All right, so he gives a man, first of all, a direction concerning our ambition. If any man desire to be first, that's ambition. I want to be first. Now, first has to do with the chief in rank and position. Now, this goes back to our thinking, right? Somebody with a title is more important than somebody without a title. Well, he has an office and I have a cubicle. We were watching some Christmas movie the other night, and I told Libby, I said, I think it was a Christmas movie. I said, I would hate to do that every day. She said, what, go to work? I said, no, it's not it. To work in a cubicle, just to be stuck, like in the middle of the office with like, look, I would hate that. I would hate that. That would not be for me. Drive me crazy. Now, if I could have a corner office overlooking maybe the beach or overlooking like the cityscape or whatever, and I've got, I don't know, a 15 by 15, 15 by 20, something moderate office space, full of windows, somebody bringing me coffee, I can probably make it a month or two. You see, that's our mentality of what success is and what importance is. All right, and so it's to vie for that position. So Jesus said, if any man desire to be first in position, in rank. He's speaking in language that they understand. This is what they were talking about. If any man desires, the word desire speaks of a will, a desire, and intention. If you desire to be first in rank, if you intend to have that position, this is what you're shooting for, this is your ambition. Now, so he addresses their ambition. I do not believe that Jesus is out to destroy your ambition. Ambition in and of itself is not a bad thing. The key to that is, what are you aspiring to do? Right? I'm aspiring to make a name for myself. Well, you got the wrong motive for your ambitions. You got great ambitions, you've got the wrong motive. Right? All right, and so Jesus is not trying to kill their ambition or remove. On the contrary, we read things in Scripture like this, and you can quote the verses. If I tell you to go to Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, doeth thy might. Give it everything you got. Go wide open for it. Right? All right, 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whether therefore you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all the glory of God. That's ambition. Go wide open. Go 100% at it. Mark 12:30, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with most of your heart, some of your soul, and part of your mind. No. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. He is not against ambition. So understand that Jesus, when he talks to his disciples, he's not against you having goals. He's not against you having direction. He's not against you having purpose. He's not against you being diligent. He's not against you bettering yourself or learning. Don't misunderstand that. But that is not what they were seeking to do. In fact, by Jesus stopping them, by Jesus bringing them in and setting them down, Jesus is going to refocus their ambitions. Okay, it's great you want to do these things. Remember how excited they were? Jesus sent them out, they come back, and they were excited. Even the devils. And that's when he told them, be more, there's real joy in having your name written down, right? Rejoice not. Okay, so he's just going to redirect these ambitions. All right, so then he gives direction concerning our mission. He said, if any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all and servant of all. That he said, this is how you become great, is to become last and become the servant. That is an oxymoron from the way we think. That's one of them paradoxes in Scripture. This is not the way we think. This is not the way we have been programmed. We want to have the first seat. Jesus speaks about the first seat, doesn't he? Remember when he tells them about the feast? He said, when you go into a feast, don't take the upper rooms and the higher chairs. Why? He said, because you're going to be real embarrassed when they come up there and get you and bring you back down to where your seating chart has. He said, you go into the lowest room and let them come and find you and bring you up. Jesus said that. He taught about that. All right, now the significance here is this. If you want to be great, not in your eyes, not in man's eyes, the preacher's eyes, society's eyes, but in God's eyes, he said you're going to have to aspire to bring yourself low and to be a servant. So greatness, as defined in the eyes of God, is not a man of position, but rather a man of submission. Is that a fair statement? I think it is. Greatness in the eyes of God is not a man of great position. Listen, there's been a lot of great position men that knew nothing of God. But it's a man of great submission. So he gives us direction concerning that. The spirit behind that verse, does it not echo our theme verse to the book of Mark, Mark 10 and 45? Turn over a page in your Bible. Let's read it. For even the Son of Man, Jesus said, even me, came not to be ministered unto. Now stop. Is that not what men of great position want? We want to be served. Bring me this. Bring me this. We're going to talk about children here in just a second. Even fathers. Hey, go grab me this. Go in the other room, get me this. Bring it to me. You know what you're doing? You are saying, listen, I am the authority. You are beneath me. You are under me. I don't want to walk over there. Your legs are younger than mine. Go get that for me and bring it back. Now again, my children never had to endure that because I was always so fair. We're going to talk about children here in just a minute. Caleb does really good when I say stuff like that. He just smiles and shakes his head. Now, but Jesus makes the statement. He said, for even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. So the spirit behind what Jesus is instructing them to do, you find is the spirit, heart, motive, and attitude that Jesus, whom we know to be a greater than Solomon, is here. He's carrying that forth. He said, look, this is how I am, and the Father calls me great, and this is how I want you to be. This is what makes people great. Now, I know your mind goes to the ball cap and Trump and make America great again, and maybe I should have entitled the message, Make Christianity Great Again. I don't know. But there really is a formula for greatness. Now, by the way, you talk about submission and humility, probably not the one that came up with that slogan. But I'm just telling you, God has a solution for it. God has a plan for it, and God has direction. You want to be great in the eyes of God. You want to matter when you get to the kingdom. By the way, is there not a premise in this whole, even in their conversation? It's not how they can be great now. It's how they can be great then. You see, I think sometimes we are shooting for greatness here. We are aspiring rather for greatness here and trying to be famous and trying to be popular and trying to leave an impact and leave a mark. And I'm not against all of those things to a point. But let me tell you, we are living for there. For that day when we'll bow in Revelation 4 and we'll begin to cast our crowns back at the feet of one who's truly great. Right? And so he tells them, here's how to do it. Here's how to do it. If you want to be rewarded then, I'm getting ahead of myself, but if you go to Philippians chapter number 2, what's he say? Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation. God made himself. Nobody made him do it. He voluntarily did it. By the way, you want to be great, you want to submit to the things of God, you want to humble yourself, it's going to make a decision that you make. Nobody can make it for you. But made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. Men beneath God, created beings, fallen people. He's made in the likeness of human men, fallible. He wasn't fallible, but made in the fashion of. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Our mission is not to build ourselves up in the kingdom, but to spread the gospel for the sake of adding those to the kingdom. Then he gives us direction using an illustration. Verse 36, and he took a child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them. He uses a child as an illustration. Now we know that Jesus himself is an illustration, but he uses a child as an illustration. The ironic thing about this, I guess, is in that culture, and it's really not that much different today. Children were regarded in a lower esteem or even of lower value than a full-grown man. We do the same thing, right? Man, go on, do something. Get away from me. I don't have time for you. I don't have time to fool around. Those things are childish. What we're saying is those are insignificant, and you're insignificant. We have more important things to do. That's what we're saying. Now, in reality, some of them are childish because they're children, right? However, Jesus uses what the world says that's childish, that's beneath, that's insignificant. And Jesus said, I want to teach you a lesson. And he brings this child forth. And Jesus is sitting there, they're sitting down, and Jesus brings him forth. And Jesus begins to teach him. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them. And so you see he's regarded as lower worth. If you go, he said unto them, let me read it. Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me. Whosoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me. Now, I think you really need to get the full grasp of the whole conversation, you need to go back and read Matthew's account. So we're not going to do it for the sake of time, but if you go back and read Matthew chapter number 18, verse number 4, here he's talking about receiving the child. But in Matthew, he talks not only about receiving the child, but becoming like unto a child. Okay, Matthew 18:4. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now that's plain. Essentially, what Jesus said is it's not all of y'all that have done all of these great things. It's not everyone that as you're around and you're kind of keeping guard of me and you travel with me. Oh, no. He said, that child right there, his humility, he's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Can you ever wonder what was going through that child's mind? Me? I'm just happy to be here. I mean, you know how kids are. They're not thinking about that stuff. You know what it shows? It shows innocence. A child is fully dependent upon the care of another. Maybe we should take a lesson. Look what I can do. I can cast out devils. I can do this, yeah, until you get to one that reveals you ain't been praying, you ain't been fasting, you ain't been walking with God like you're supposed to, and then all of a sudden your humanity sticks out because you're dependent upon you instead of upon me. Jesus, they're arguing. There's no way that you could look at them without almost feeling the air deflate out of them. And by the way, when they got quiet when Jesus said, I'm going to die and I'm coming back. They're afraid to ask him. When Jesus said, what were y'all arguing about? They didn't say nothing. Which is a revealer of they probably knew. We probably shouldn't have been talking about that. Now, I believe it's Luke. It might be Matthew, but I believe it's Luke that reveals that they finally asked Jesus, okay, Lord, who's the greatest? Who's going to be the greatest? But at first, they didn't answer him. Which, by the way, is probably a good thing. Because it probably reveals that there was some growth, that something that Jesus had been trying to teach them over and over and over was finally setting in because it dawned on them. You know, if you know that you shouldn't have said something, you won't say it again. But if you're clueless and you don't see what the problem is, it'll come right out of your mouth again. So it's probably a good indication that, man, this thing's taking hold. It's just taking a little time. You say, preacher, I'm struggling with this thing. It's starting to take hold. You're in good company. It might just be taking a little time. So he uses this child as an illustration. Man, I'm out of time. I'm done. Let me give you the third thing. Are you ready? Live according to his directive. And maybe I'll come back and get this, and maybe I won't. But live according to his directive. This is where they rebuke this one man because he's trying to he's casting out demons. By the way, successfully. He's doing what they couldn't. Now, I don't know what kind they were, but I know they were demons. And because he wasn't traveling with them, some people believe he's a follower of John the Baptist that was now become a believer, but yet he didn't travel with them, but yet he had faith. I don't know the details. I just know there's sometimes that we need to take care of ourselves and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. You know, we're trying to make everybody carbon copies of us rather than worry about what they're doing. And then he talks about how not to offend, and I probably will come back and get this one, at least touch on it, because here's the significance of this. He closes this chapter with verse number 50. And what he says is essentially this. Now, after all that, y'all need to get along. Because offenses are going to come. People are watching. You have a purpose. You have a calling. And we don't have time for y'all to be bickering among yourselves over nonsense. Because there's something at stake. There's the kingdom at stake. Now, listen to verse number 50. Salt is good, but if the salt lost its savor, its saltiness, wherewith shall we season it? Have salt in yourselves, look at it, and have peace one with another. And have peace one with another. You say, preacher, can God really use us for greatness? Will God really reward his formula for greatness? I quoted Philippians chapter number 2. And that's when Jesus came, took upon himself the form of a servant, made himself another reputation, took upon himself the form of a servant, and became obedient to death, even the death of the cross. I stopped in verse number 8. But you know what verse number 9 starts with? Wherefore God also hath highly exalted him. God's exaltation came after Jesus' willing humiliation. There's a lesson to learn from that. If God would honor and exalt his Son for that self-humiliation and give him a name which is above every name, I'm telling you, that's the secret to greatness. The essence of greatness is not being someone of position and power and authority. No, it's being the best servant that we can possibly be to build the kingdom of Christ and to prepare them for that day. And may God help us to see things. May the Lord help me to see things from that perspective, that God called me to be a servant. If nobody ever knows my name or your name or whoever, God help me to be the very best servant. Keep my focus on you. Not worry about you. God will take care of all those things. Just be the servant that God has called me to be and that Christ has given me the example of being. Would you stand with me tonight? If you just want to come and pray, there's some have come around the altar. You come and do that. Maybe you just want to come and say, Lord, would you help me to be the servant that you want me to be? Not a false humility. Not a woe is me, look at all I'm doing, and I'm just here suffering for the Lord. No. A true, genuine servant. God, help me to be the servant. You say, preacher, that don't make us set our goals very high. We're aspiring to be last. That's what you're telling me. We're aspiring to put yourself last. I thought about this. He talks about offenses. When we put ourselves last, it's hard to offend somebody that's put themselves last. It's hard for us to get out of our feelings hurt when we put ourselves last. Listen, when you're last, there's only one way to go. So you're not setting your goals low, you're setting your goals high. You just have the wrong perspective. So may God help us to refocus.